September. Just a few announcements at the start, just to remind colleagues who might be joining remotely to mute your microphone and turn off your camera unless you're speaking, please. Just to remind everyone that the meeting is being live streamed, and if I may, while all of us enjoy very informal approaches outside of the meeting, for the purposes of online and recording, if we could refer to each other by job title or role in the meeting, so anyone listening in or viewing is clear who's being spoken to and about, that'd be really helpful. All speakers are asked to ensure they're talking into their microphone. We're not expecting a fire alarm, so if the alarm sounds, please follow me to the nearest fire exit. I am assuming that members have read all of the papers in advance, and therefore we won't be asking officers to go into detail in the reports, but to give us the highlights and the things that are pertinent and salient. Welcome to our cabinet member, both online and in the room, and you're welcome to raise any items that you wish to contribute to, but again, I'd ask you to keep your comments brief. We've had apologies from no councillors, but Councillor Rousel is attending remotely, and we think Councillor Fife Cook will be joining us shortly, subject to transport. Any declarations of interest?
I'm not sure if I should, but in one of the items, audit items, there's an article about the virtual wallet, and I've been in receipt of payment from a parent from the virtual wallet. Belt and braces, I'm claiming that.
Okay, and in similar vein, I am a member of the local government pension scheme, but not Devon. Different part of it, but declare it out of interest. Anything else? Oh, so
thank you for jogging my memory. As an employee of another authority, I'm a recipient, or eventually will be a recipient, of a payout from the local government pension scheme.
Well, belt and braces. My husband is a retired fire officer in receipt of a pension, which is through Devon County Council.
Thank you very much for that. And if during the course of the meeting you think, oh gosh, I do have an interest, then please just declare it at the relevant time. Let's move on to the next item, which is the minutes of the 29th of September. Are you content for me to sign them as a correct record? I'm happy to propose. Councillor Morgan seconds. Are we all in favour? We are. That's that job done. Thank you very much. Items requiring urgent attention. I'm not aware of any. Is there anything else? Nope. Excellent. Item 5, Chair's announcements. I'm going to take item 15 here, which is about the appointment of independent members to the audit committee, and I'm going to ask Tony Rose from the Devon Audit Partnership just to briefly outline, and then we'll take it from there.
Thank you very much, Chair. So a very brief update. We've been working with various officers across the council to help comply with the guidance around independent cooperative members for the audit committee for a little over 12 months or so. I'm really pleased to put forward to the committee now that following meetings with 2 potential candidates last week, we believe that there are 2 people ready to join the committee if the committee are so minded to agree to that. It's really positive. They are really good people. And ultimately, I think it will be really good for the committee to get the knowledge and expertise that these people can bring to support the members in their roles.
Thank you very much. And the Vice Chair and I met with the 2 external people last week, and I think very good conversations with them. We would happily recommend both for your approval today. So with that, I'm quite happy to propose. Councillor was happy to second. Any questions? You will have seen outside of the meeting their CVs. Everyone content? I'll take a show of hands, and we are content. Thank you very much for that. So let's move then to item 6, which is the 2024-25 Devon County Council Audit Findings Report. This is in part 1, but colleagues will know at the end of the agenda there's an exempt item. I'm intending that when we've dealt with part 1, we'll go into part 2 to deal with any questions members might have relating to the exempt item, or if there's anything the officers want to say to us in the exempt section. That, although messy from a meeting point of view, because we're going to go into exempt session and then back into part one, it will enable the officers concerned to leave the meeting and go about their other business. So is that okay? So we'll do that when we get to it. So if I may, Pete Barber. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, committee. So item 6 on your agenda is our audit findings report for the council for 24-25. I'm joined today on the call by Sam, the audit manager, and Eben, the in charge. And I will run through a brief summary of the main issues for your attention, but with your permission, Chair, I will hand over to Eben, who will go through a little bit more of the detail. It is a detailed report and I will take it as read, but clearly to discharge our role as your auditors, we do need to spend a bit of time with you as those charged with governance, setting out the main findings from our work. So in terms of where we are as of today, the report was dated last week. You will see that in the summary, we reported that the work is substantially complete. Pleased to be report that we've made further progress in that intervening period, and there are no additional issues arising that I need to bring to your attention. There is 1 or 2 smaller items outstanding that we will work with officers on over the next couple of days, and subject to resolving those remaining outstanding areas and queries, we are in a position, subject to that work, to issue a clean, unqualified opinion, hopefully later this week. And whilst that is slightly later than the original timetable we were working to, is nonetheless way ahead of the end of February deadline. And the fact that when in undertaking this work that has been very involved on both sides, we have not identified to date any material errors in the accounts, does provide this committee, those charged with governance, with assurance that the authority continues to have the ability to produce complete, accurate and timely accounts. You will see, having read the summary, that we do reference the fact that the audit has taken slightly longer this year, and there's been a number of contributory factors to that. The introduction of IFRS 16 nationally has proved very challenging, and you have been impacted by that significantly, as most upper tier authorities have, so that's required further work on our part. You've also undertaken the small matter of introducing a new financial system, so clearly finance officers in particular are particularly stretched, and they're simultaneously trying to implement that new system, support the 4-5 audit process, manage the ongoing budget challenges for the in-year position. And I'm also conscious that it seems every year that you start your budget setting process for the following year earlier every year, and they've been involved in that as well. So there has been some further delays, and what we will be looking to do is discuss those with officers going forward and learn from them from next year. And there is an impact on the accounts and the fees for the audit as a result of that, and that is set out in a bit of detail on page 63. But overall, as I said, you can take comfort from this report. What I will do, with your permission, Chair, is hand over to Eben, who will just take you through a little bit more detail on each of the key significant risk areas that we've covered as a result of our work.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Pete. Okay. Sorry. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Chair, and all present. I'm sorry we had a brief technical issue here, but I'm glad to be part of this meeting. As Pete already mentioned, my name is Ebenezer, and by way of a brief introduction, I'm the in-charge accountant for this year's audit, same as last year, and my responsibilities have been overseeing the day-to-day delivery of the audit, and also ensuring timely completion of the work, coaching the team, and also serving as the main point of contact with management. And so before we delve into the main issues, we would like to express our sincere appreciation to the Council's finance team for their cooperation and also timely responses, which have been instrumental in bringing us to this stage. So to delve deeper into our main discussions, our approach for 24-25, which is consistent with the prior years, is primarily substantive with a headline materiality of 31 million for 24-25. And we focused on the risk of material misstatement in broadly 3 significant areas. We centered on management override of controls, valuation of land and buildings, and valuation of net pension liability. And for this year specifically, we focused also on the implications of IFRS 16. And for these areas and across the financial statements, we've performed the necessary procedures to obtain reasonable assurance and have provided recommendations where appropriate for your attention. Delving into the significant risk areas, we would want to discuss briefly the work we've done to gain assurance over management override of controls. So if you could please turn to page 16 of the audit findings report, which is page 18 of your pack. That's where we've discussed the first significant risk, which relates to management override of controls, as already mentioned. And here we tested 70 journals that were selected through a risk-based approach using data analytics. And we can confirm that all journals were supported by appropriate documentation and were for valid business transactions. So no significant issues were identified in this regard. However, we've raised some control recommendations around system limitations and manual authorization processes, and these are detailed on pages 49 to 45 of the audit findings report. And as we go along, I think after we are done with the last point, we'll be happy to take any questions on these matters. And then if we move on to page 19, which is page 21 of the pack, we've covered our risk assessment relating to land and building valuations, and our work in this area is complete. We have no significant issues to report. However, we did note minor differences in floor space used by the valuer, and this is explained in detail on page 30 of the audit findings report. The impact is not material, and we've reported this in detail as well. We'd also want to pick on what we've done on pension liability, which we've described on page 20 of the audit findings report, and this can also be found on page 22 of the pack. And with regards to net pension liability, we've reviewed the actuaries' work, including the methods, assumptions, source data, and also confirmed compliance with IFRIC 14. And with the work we've done so far, no significant issues were identified, and we've completed our work in this area as well. However, we noted 2 understatements which were brought to our attention by the Devon Pension Fund Audit Team, which I know will be discussed in detail by the Pension Fund Auditor. And this is mainly arising from timing differences, which we've reported previously, and also omission of long-term investments. The total understatement is estimated to be around 31.7 million, with an impact of 5.1 million on the council's share of the pension fund assets. These matters, we've assessed them, and based on what management has also communicated, we've agreed not to adjust the council's asset balance because they are not material. We consider that the approach that management has adopted is reasonable and therefore comfortable with the decision not to adjust. Lastly, if we move on to page 22 of the audit findings report, which is also page 24 of the pack, we've looked at IFRS 16 implementations. We've reviewed the assumptions, the source data, evaluation methods, and also the treatment of peppercorn leases, as well as adjustments that were made to 3 PFI arrangements to ensure compliance with IFRS 16. And following consultations with partnering authorities, especially for Plymouth Energy from Waste arrangement, we noted that there shouldn't have been an adjustment to the to the PFI liability. And so based on discussions and work done, there was an adjustment of 10 million to reverse an earlier transition adjustment that management put into the accounts for Plymouth Energy from Waste. Apart from this, the other energy from waste, which is Exeter PFI, has been appropriately assessed based on IFRS 16 implementation with no issues noted. And also with regards to right of use assets, we've reviewed the work management has done with no significant issues noted. In fact, there wasn't a material right of use asset, which is within expectation because in prior years, we've not identified material operating leases in the accounts. So we've done a holistic work in this approach, and we have a few outstanding tasks to complete with regards to the Plymouth Energy from Waste, which Pete mentioned earlier on, but we don't foresee any significant issue coming up based on the work we've done up to this point. So we want to conclude that our audit recommendations are summarized on page 49 of the audit findings report, with details of adjusted and unadjusted misstatements on page 42 up to page 48. So we would thank you once again for your time, and also to the finance team for their cooperation. And we will take the remainder of the report as read, and happy to fill in answers for any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and in particular for your comments about your observations, and also the support you've received from the Council's finance team. It's much appreciated. Colleagues, questions? No?
I've got an observation, Chair. Perhaps I could stay till we're
Okay.
the latter part.
So if I may ask a couple of questions. At the outset, you identified that you'd raised some queries with the council, and you'd received management responses to them. For clarity, can I check that as our external auditors, you are content with the responses that you received?
Yeah, yes, Chair, if I may.
I was looking
sorry.
there, and then the voice coming from over there.
Oh, is on? Can you hear me? Yeah, yeah. So we've had a very good, strong track record of receiving complete, accurate and timely responses from finance officers and the wider council to our audit queries. That remains the case this year as well. As I explained in my introduction, it has taken slightly longer due to the reasons outlined, but nonetheless, my reflection is at least that there is, a mutual respect, good professional working relationship. We ultimately want the same thing. You produce the accounts, we audit those, and it's gone as well as can be expected given the wider challenges facing the organisation in terms of the new system, but also the continued changes in the auditing standards, including the implementation of IFRS 16. So, as I said in my introduction, the fact that we've been able to get to this stage in November, and that whilst there are changes made to those accounts and they are different from the original version, none of those changes are material. And ultimately, when I do sign, hopefully this week, I am signing to say they are materially accurate. So it is another positive message, but we always recognise that there is scope for improvement, and we will be working with officers next year, ahead of next year, to ensure that we can deliver our responsibilities quicker, because clearly next year the deadline remains the same, but the following year the deadline for signing off the accounts will be the end of November, which will make it very tight if we don't have that improved working practices in place.
Thank you for that. That's reassuring. If I didn't misunderstand what was in there, I think there were some parts of the organisation which took a bit longer to reply, and that's resulted in a small additional charge. I haven't misunderstood that, have I? And it's one which I think you indicated moving forward that we ought to be in a position to try and avoid that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Chair. So the delays in the main have been, well, some of them were in relation to the valuers, and you use some external valuers as part of that process, but also most of the work that we do is responded to by the finance team. But there are things like the journals that Evan was talking to earlier, where finance officers have to go out to the wider council to get that source information to support the transactions, and that is often where some of the challenges come.
So, look, I don't want to hold up a whole committee on a relatively small amount of money, but nonetheless, while on the one hand the council's trying to save money, it ought not to be letting it flow out. And I think the point is well made that if we don't respond in time, there's a consequence to that. Probably on I noted as well that a member of the public had raised queries and incurred some, cost as well, which are entitled to do. But I think, again, the quicker these things are dealt with, it keeps the cost to a minimum, doesn't it? The one thing that I think the audit committee members want me to raise with you as our external auditors as part of the way we work going forward is the opportunity to meet with our external auditors privately without officers present in order to have a conversation and part of our development. So via our support, we're going to look to do that at some time tail end of January with you, and I hope that fits in with Grant Thornton's time slot. But I think it's important that the audit committee looks to adopt its new practices, and I thought as we're talking about our audit, it would be a good moment to say that as well.
Yeah, absolutely, Chair. So I'm conscious we do have the pre-meets, don't we, that involve officers as well. But best practice does dictate that at appropriate times of the year that members of the committee should meet with both the internal and external auditors to discuss in private any matters that either party wants to raise. So we're absolutely receptive to doing that and would be happy to attend those meetings. Often they happen immediately before or after audit committees. Equally, we're happy to do them at another time, whatever suits.
That's brilliant. Thank you ever so much. And I know Councillor Hayward, you had an observation.
Thank you, Chair. It's a very, very small point, but just for consistency within your report, your figure work changes from page to page. So, for example, sometimes you refer to something as 5.63 million, and then you'll refer to it as 5,630k, and then on the same page you'll refer to it as sort of 200k and then 200,000. If you could just for the sake of ease of reading, but because I personally don't naturally read 5,630k, it just doesn't read right. But it's just a minor point. But if you could just, when the final draft is done, just apply that consistency through it, it'd be really helpful. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, absolutely to that. I mean, the one observation I would make is that in the appendices, when we tend to put in the actual detailed adjustments, either corrected or uncorrected, we do tend to put them in thousands, where actually, if you're doing a narrative within the report, you tend to use the millions. But you're absolutely right. I did know when I had a quick look at it before today that there is inconsistencies on the same page, isn't there? So it's a valid point and something that, if we'd had a little bit more time, I'm hoping we would have picked up, but we will take it forward for next year.
Thank you. And can I just check, we need to go into part 2 now for the part 2 item, or is it on the next item? Just take some guidance, sorry. It's your defined
Is it the
pension fund? Yeah, we'll do it on.
Do item 7 and then go into
Do it. That's brilliant. Okay. So, sorry, Councillor Seth.
Thank you. I refer to our page 67 of the audit findings, and I'd just like some clarification, please. You mentioned farming, respective responsibilities, and should I just read it out quickly? As auditors, we're responsible for performing the audit in accordance with ISA UK, which is directed towards farming and expressing an opinion on the financial statements that have been prepared.
Should be 4.
Forming. Ah, right, it's okay. So it's now you can see why thank you. I thought it said farming and I thought, where the heck did that come in? It's forming. So I do apologise, but it does prove that. I also would add that I do not like that, the background of that, because it does make reading, and I've just demonstrated the colour is difficult to read. So skip that. Please take into consideration the white on the purpley running into red. It is difficult, and for those of us who find difficulty reading tomes like this and to effectively scrutinise, I would respectfully request that rather attractive colour is maybe not used again. It was forming, not farming, so apologise for that. Thank you, Chairman.
Well, I'm sure
I apologise for wasting time,
No,
but I think
no,
I've proved the
you've
point.
not wasted any time, and I'm sure lots of people will go and look for that now as a deliberate error, but it shows you read it. The recommendation there is that the Audit Committee note the auditor's annual report for 24-25 financial year. May I take a proposer? Councillor Morgan. May I take a seconder? Councillor Blake. No, it's just a moment. That was it. Sorry. All agreed? Yeah, we're all in favour. Thank you. So let's move to item 7, which is the 2024-25 Devon Pension Fund audit findings on pages 79 to 130. It's Beth Bowers and Chris Avient from Grant Thornton.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to do similar to Pete. I'm just going to do a very quick introduction and then let Chrissa take over for a little bit of the detail. But this is a reminder to members that this is the second time you're seeing this report. We've seen it previously in September. So I'm pleased to be able to say that, like Pete is able to give a clean opinion on the County Council's accounts, we are anticipating giving a clean opinion on the pension funds accounts at the same time. As you know, we've been ready pretty much since last committee in September, but the two opinions have to be signed together. And so we come back today just so that it's clear to everybody what's happening in terms of both sets of responsibilities. We also expect to issue a consistency opinion, and this is an opinion on the consistency of the financial statements that are included within the pension fund annual report with those that have been subject to audit, and that's so a full and final version of the annual report can be published by the 1st of December deadline. There have been a few small updates to the report since the version that was last presented to committee. I hope members have had a second version circulated with some blue text which highlighted those items, but I'll just hand over to Chrissa to very briefly pick up on a few of the key elements, and then we'll open to any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Beth, and good afternoon, everyone. So as Beth said, most of this content has been discussed in the last audit committee meeting. So just wanted to highlight that we have now completed our financial statements audit work, and all reviews have been also completed. And Beth also mentioned about the LGPS annual report. So this is now completed subject to final engagement lead review, and we're planning to issue a consistency opinion on the pension funds annual report, which confirms material consistency between this report and the financial statements of the pension fund as well. On page 34 of our report and page 114 of the report pack, we have reported an unadjusted misstatement of 16.4 million as an understatement in the investment values. So this is immaterial and therefore was not adjusted in the accounts, but have been reported as this is above our reporting threshold. On the next page, we also reported a total of 7 recommendations. So we have discussed the ones previously, but the additional recommendation will be discussed in the part 2 of the audit committee meeting, as this is a joint recommendation between the council and the pension fund. Happy to take any questions if there's any.
Okay, thank you very much. Colleagues, questions? Nothing? Okay. No particular questions. On the underreporting, not material, you said, is there any note of it that the committee should make? Does it signify anything? Is there anything we should be aware of?
Chair, if I may take that one, sorry to surprise you again. this is very normal in a pension fund situation. Because of the nature of some of the investments being highly complex, they have to be estimated at a point in time in order for management to be able to produce a set of financial statements for us to audit them. By the time we then come to audit them, because they are more complex, we tend to leave them towards the latter part of our audit. It means that more information is available to us than is available to management at the time that they produce their accounts. And therefore, it is very commonplace that across the country, all local government pension schemes will see adjustments or proposed adjustments between the draft financial statements and the final signed. Given these are not material, we haven't requested that they are adjusted for, and they're comfortably below the materiality threshold, which is 4 or 5 times the value that is reported as unadjusted. So from our perspective, there's no concern, and it's very normal practice that this happens.
Thank you. That's very reassuring. If there are no questions, may I propose that we go into part 2 to do with the exempt item at the end of the agenda now, which will release the officers. Is that okay? So for clarity, I am recommending that the press and public be excluded from the meeting for the following item of business under section 100A4 of the Local Government Act 1972 on the grounds that it involves a likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of Schedule 12A of the Act, information relating to the financial or business affairs of an individual, including the authority holding that information, and in accordance with section 36 of the Freedom Information Act 2000, by virtue of the fact that the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. So I propose, may I have a seconder? Councillor Hayward seconds. Are we all in favour? And we are. So if you tell us when we're live, are we?
Hi Zoe, can you confirm when we're back online, please?
Back on, I think, aren't we?
Hi Lou, you are back live now.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much, and for people viewing in, thank you for bearing with us. We are back in open session, and so we are still on agenda item 7. We've discussed prior to going into exempt session the report and the findings on the Devon Pension Fund. We had a discussion in private session, which we are now back into open session. So may I take you to the recommendation, which is that the Audit Committee notes the attached Audit Findings Report 24/25 for Devon County Council provided by Grant Thornton LLP. I'm happy to propose that. A seconder is Councillor Rake. Are we all in favour? We are. You abstained, but you obviously joined in, that's fine. So that's content, and thank you very much. For relevant colleagues, if now's your time to go, please do. If you need to stay, most welcome, but we won't need to go into exempt session at the end of the meeting. All right, thank you very much. So we'll move now to item 8, which is a statement of accounts and the annual governance statement. Please, Peter.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just say a few words before I hand over to my colleague, the Head Accountant for Strategy and Compliance. So the purpose of this report is to ask members to approve the Statement of Accounts for 24/25, following obviously considering Grant Thornton's Audit Findings Report. So I just want to acknowledge really the team, and this is obviously preparing a Statement of Accounts is a complex piece of work, a significant amount of work and highly technical. So acknowledge the amount of work that's got into this, and that this was the unaudited accounts were published ahead of the statutory deadline on the 25th of June. And given, as Grant Thornton have mentioned, the issues we've had with implementing a new finance system, just want to acknowledge that that was a significant achievement for us. So just a quick intro, but I will now hand over to Head Accountant for Strategy and Compliance. He'll be able to talk you through a few key points from the accounts. Thank you.
Thank you. There are 3 recommendations accompanying this report. One is for the Audit Committee to review and approve the Authority Statement of Accounts, and to review and approve the Pension Fund Statement of Accounts, and to review and approve the Management Letters of Representation, which are appendices to this report. So we're on page 131 of your pack. So if we go over to section 3, just pointing out that, as the auditors have pointed out, that we had to introduce, or we had to implement, International Financial Reporting Standard 16 about lease accounting. So it introduced even more complexity to an already complex set of accounts. And the auditors have reported their findings on that. And we've made any significant changes that we've needed to make on that. So in effect, what were standard operating costs within service accounts have now been put onto the balance sheet. The annual governance statement has already been approved at the meeting in July, so take that as read. In terms of the authority's accounts, section 5 of this report, the key messages have understandably focused on the treatment of the deficit for special educational needs and disabilities, and the impact it will have showing on our unusable reserves. You can see the table that had been taken from the outturn report that was presented to Cabinet at the end of June. And then on page 134, we can see that we have a total accumulated DSG adjustment account, that's the deficit overall of 167.3 million, of which the high needs block, the DSG, is 169 million. That means that this authority has spent on DSG send 169 million pounds more than it's received in grant. And I think that is quite that would be one of the key points from the accounts. Other points have been taken from the outturn report as well. We've got a positive balance sheet, partly because of technical adjustments to the pension reserve. It's the application of the discount rate, which has meant that the pension fund deficit in the accounts has reduced significantly. And that would be the key messages from this report, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. And colleagues, just to remind ourselves, I think we've commissioned a report from the Director of Finance for our February meeting on a strategy for replenishing the council's reserves. I think we've noted the send overspend. So I'm only saying that simply that it may not be the best use of committee's time right now to pick up on either of those, but are there issues? We agreed the annual government statement at our last meeting, but are there any general issues committee wish to pick up with regard to this item? Councillor Sellis.
Thanks. I refer to 5.9 on page 135. I didn't fully understand that about the pension reserve deficit, and if an officer could explain that to me, please. It appears to be written simply, but I didn't understand it.
Okay, so in the balance sheet, in our unusable reserves, which is note 23, there are a number of reserves, and there's a technical reserve there called the pension fund reserve, right? And it's a deficit, which means that the projected liabilities for the pension element of the authorities account. So the pension fund account covers all local authorities across Devon, but for the Devon County Council's share of that deficit has reduced from £1.3 billion at the 31st of March 2021 to just under 117 million. So that deficit is calculated by the actuary. So every year the actuary has a set of data and they work out what our assets are going forward and what our future liabilities are going forward. So that's paying future pensioners their pensions going well into the future, right? And they work out what that liability is. And what they do is it might be 10, 20, longer, 30 years in the future based on the age profile of members, and they work out what that liability would be. And they also work out what those assets would be and the cash flows coming in. They do that calculation and they give us a figure at the 31st of March at the end of the year, what that surplus or deficit would be. And it's a deficit there of £117 million. So they're saying that net present value, so discounting future payments using a discount rate of 5.8% per annum, that is what the difference between our assets and our liabilities. So when people are putting money into their pension scheme and we're putting employer contributions into that scheme, we're buying assets, we're buying stock, shares, investments in infrastructure to meet the future costs of the pension fund going forward.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I understand how actuaries work, but I'm just for clarification then. The fund is short of 117 million, is it? In simple terms, that's where I was just getting muddled.
It's an actuarial assessment, and you shouldn't think of it, well, we're short by that amount, because it will change significantly year on year. So you can see over 4 years that deficit's come down because the technical adjustment of mainly about the discount rate that the actuaries use to calculate the deficit, and we have to put those in our accounts to comply with accounting standards.
thank you very much, Chairman, for time. If I've got any more queries, I'll take it outside the meeting. And I note that the lifespan is being reduced as well, isn't it? People's which is a bit scary as well. So that'll sort everything out.
For men.
No, and women. It was the same.
There's nothing you can say about that, is there?
The actuary does make assessments on longevity, and I think
I think the question is not that we're not going to live as long, it's that the rate of increase is slowing. So the assumption was that in 20 years' time we would live a lot longer than we do now. It's still that we will live longer than we do now, but not by as much as they assumed last time.
I'm just going to leave you to ponder whether you're happy about that or disappointed about that. But there's someone in adult care who's probably rubbing their hands at the thought of, anyway, let's move on. Recommendations A, B, and C, which are set out. I'm happy to propose. Second, Councillor Hayward, second. Are we all agreed? Yes, fine. We're all agreed on that. Thank you. So let's move to item 9, which is the internal audit update report, which runs from page 405 to 428. Hannah Hellier from Devon Audit Assurance.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so I'll just what I'll do is I'll just pull out the highlights from our paper, and then I'll be happy to take any questions. So on page 409 of your pack, I just wanted to draw out that we're highlighting again the positive engagement that we get from management across the council. We are also still undertaking our follow-up on SEND. That has now concluded. We are just agreeing that report, and we will bring the findings of that to the audit committee in February. And also that we've done an assessment, a risk assessment, and we've moved some of the reviews into early 2027. That's to allow us to undertake further work around Unit 4 and other areas such as duplicate payments, and that is highlighted further in the report, so I will come to that. Your pack, page 410, that's just shows our assurance map against the 3 lines of defence model. On page 411, that highlights the work that we've completed to date, and as you can see, there's been a lot more green on that page this year, so a lot more reviews have received either substantial or reasonable assurance. Page 412, that highlights the priorities that were agreed back in February last year and those that have been changed. So those highlighted in orange are the ones that we've removed from the plan and moving into early 2026-27. And those highlighted in green are those that have been added throughout the year so far. And we do anticipate more to come onto the plan before we get to the end of the financial year. Page 413, that shows our performance to date for the year. And at the time of writing this report, 30 pieces of work had been completed, with a further 23 in progress. And then from page 415 onwards, that provides a summary of all the reports that have been finalised to date. So I don't intend to go through those, but happy to take any questions.
The question I had was just simply on page 409. It's in about 2/3 down. It's a paragraph that begins, "We're undertaking a gap analysis." And just at the end, it says, "Further information will be provided in due course." And it sounds to trouble your point, but as an audit committee, due course doesn't allow us to know when we should have had it. So as a matter of sort of how STAR going forward, I think we would find it easier if you gave an end date. We'll provide it by April or whenever it is, because then we can monitor it and then come back to you. But due course doesn't enable us to do that. Is that okay?
Yes, thanks, Chair. We'll take that on board, and we do intend to try and give an update around June and July with our end of year report.
Thank you very much. Anything from colleagues? No? Okay. All right. I mean, if there is, you may want to take it up outside of the meeting if there's anything in particular. So the recommendations are set out, again, I won't read them, but the A, B and C, which are generally to review and consider. You've seen that. Are we content? So Councillor Sellers, are you happy to propose? Councillor Morgan to second. Are we all in favour? We are, and thank you very much. So that leaves us to item 10, which is the exemption from tender overview. This is pages 429 to 442, and Justin Bennett's Assistant Director of Procurement. Justin.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much. This is my transparency declaration of how the County Council is discharging its obligations under financial regulations around, in this case, the exemption from tender process, which leads us towards some instances of direct contract award, usually for reasons of urgency, which are often brought by force majeure type circumstances. Within page 2 of the paper just gives a quick overview of the salient points under financial regulations about the governance requirements of the process. I and the procurement service, working under the direction of the finance and public value leadership team, and ultimately our portfolio holder for finance, ensure the governance is handled correctly, and we try to strike the balance between a bias towards public service and making sure that the relevant contracts are awarded so the relevant business can be done by the County Council across all of its duties, while also having a presumption always towards good competition in all public contracts. In terms of some of the figures, if I could pick out a few on page 3, there's a table which gives an overview both by financial value and number of projects which we have agreed through the exemption process. We can note that the total project numbers have increased probably by about 10% from last year, where we made 122 direct awards over the financial year 24-25, which again, taken in isolation, feels perhaps quite a high number. But as we know, the width and breadth of the County Council's business goes far and wide. So in overall terms, I'm very happy to stand by the scrutiny and the approach that we take to all of these areas. The county's spend in terms of financial spend has gone up also, probably incommensurably, from 5.8 million in the previous year to 6.5 million this year. And perhaps a little bit of context around that, which I think might possibly help. Most directorates have single figures direct awards through the year, and the highest by clear view is the Climate Change, Environment and Transport Directorate, for very good reason around how the directorate supports its wide range of infrastructure, for example, bridges, highways and such like, which it very much brings into play the safety imperative and the fact that a lot of these pieces of infrastructure are really quite unique, and prioritising the convenience of the travelling public to make sure that these pieces of infrastructure are well maintained and are not out of order for very long at all. Just in terms of that little bit of contract, the public contracts work threshold at which one individual project must legally be competed is £5.3 million, and the total value of all of the CSET direct awards for the entire year comes in at 3.8 million, and therefore the entire directorate's exemption from tendering overall programme is much less than the legally permissible amount for one single project. So I do think it's absolutely right that we must look at these things from all angles, but also the perspective and context, I think, is very relevant also. And just finally, and I'll then conclude. The vast majority of all of the directorates direct awards are lower than £50,000. 21 come in at between 50,000 to 100,000, and just 12 are above £100,000. And again, that gives the context. And I would say in the overall county council's operation, this is, I think I would describe this as tail spend. So in essence, this is in large part not the big stuff that is being directly awarded. It's the tail spend, the complementary services in large part that fit around the council's operations. And as I say, we try to take an enabling environment to this to make sure that the public good is best served, and that we do not let a good challenge and the good assurance process, we don't let that get in the way of the job being done. Chair.
Thank you very much. And looking through the list, I realise, not that it's an interest for me to declare, but the community in my division benefited quite substantially from the exemption. So obviously it shows that exemptions are needed. I think for me, it wasn't so much the number or the spend, but the number had increased. And my question was simply, are you satisfied that there isn't a kind of creeping, oh, that's okay? In the report, you very hopefully set out both the thresholds and the decision making as it goes up the hierarchy, which is really helpful to see. But equally, no, not equally, but sometimes people can say, oh, that's okay. And you end up getting more because it's simpler to do. Are you satisfied that that's not the case, that each one is properly considered?
I'm grateful for that question, because that area is something we have to continually work really hard at. We have to continually work at making sure there isn't any growing complacency about, can we just do it this way because it's swifter or easier or whatever may be. I passionately believe that running a due competitive process for public sector contracts is absolutely the right thing to do, but I do also believe there are some marginal areas where the phrase is in the word, where an exemption process is appropriate. And I think I would like the opportunity to continually emphasise across all directorates that the endorsement, that the support of the audit committee must be that we should continually aim to prioritise good due competition and not let that any creeping complacency ever creep in around how we manage this area.
Brilliant, and I think that's what we want you to do. Thank you very much for that. Councillor Morgan.
I always find this really interesting, and I always have really good scrutiny of the things that have gone through, and there's one in particular that sort of stood out a little bit. On the appendix, 8, people and culture, it's the last page, count 4. School name in brackets, wish to place an existing staff member. Is that a holding name, or do you know which school that is? Because that's the sort of thing that can sometimes sort of flip through. It seems to me we don't know. Generic school, any school?
Well, yes, indeed. Yeah, if I may, yeah, absolutely. So you will notice that there are no supplier names on this, and there are no individual locations such as schools, in the sense that for the purposes of this overview, I intend to bring it in a dispassionate way that doesn't identify school A or school B to remain with the principle of, is the direct award correct, rather than taking us to individual case scenarios, which then takes us into a discussion about a particular school or a particular location. If I could, so that's purposeful, that this information is genericized. But what I can also offer, whether it gives you further assurance, every single one of these is backed up by probably a 3 or a 4-page form with probably about 7 or 8 questions on that form, which tests all of these things from different angles. And it might be about the competitive market, it might be about the, you know, the going into more depth about the imperative, and that's the type of thing that our finance leadership team and our portfolio holder as appropriate, and our procurement managers, we cover that in a great degree of depth before it would ever come to this type of committee. There are layers in this of assurance and challenge, but we try to get those layers correct so they do not become bureaucracy, they just become doing the job well.
That's brilliant, and we're just all reassured that you read that, because I read it over the weekend and I didn't even see that. There we are. Councillor Sellis.
Thanks. I would just like to say I actually found this incredibly interesting, and albeit the font size was just mind-boggling, I had to get my magnifying glass out. However, I think it is very useful for elected members to know, and I'm just wondering, we get a lot of criticism from the public, and I just wonder whether our council actually gets this message out. I know we periodically put a leaflet out with pie charts and what have you, but it was a real eye-opener to me, and I'm quite an experienced councillor, and I'd like to thank you for the fact that I was able to read it. That's you know, it is important, and I do ask the question if we're really letting the public know, or whether we need to or whether we should.
I'll ponder that while Councillor Rake asks his question.
Thank you. And thank you for your report, which I share my colleagues' view of. Just for context, so we've got 6.6 million of exempt procurement. What's the total value of procured? Just what percentage of that?
Thank you. It very much varies according to what is within the particular procurement programme on any given year, and it can very much vary, particularly by the capital programme, because very often capital takes us to really rather large sums of money, and that's also sometimes, you know, it can take longer to run one procurement than it can run 10 different procurements of a different theme. So it really does vary. But if I can give a broad colloquial, I would say the external spend of the county council is in the realm of about 330 million pounds a year in the round, but it varies on a lot of components, including, as I say, capital infrastructure spend, and of course the pipeline of procurements can vary significantly from one year to the other, and some roll over multiple years. Quite readily we'll compete projects for 5 or 6, which will run over 5 or 6 years, and then we'll also be doing some individual contracts which might only have a lifespan of 4 or 5 months. It really depends how the work program operates. And I wonder, Chair, if I could reply to the earlier question also, please, around transparency. And thank you both for your feedback. So with the new procurement legislation, which I obviously took to this committee probably a year ago now, and it is now live and came into being in February, we will now be publishing, as is inconsistent with the legislation, the new legislation, every contract that is exempted above £30,000 is required to have an accompanying contracts details notice. That's the formal name under the legislation, which is intended to support public transparency on these items and will now be published going forward, which is a requirement of the new legislation.
I think Councillor Rake wanted to come back, and then I'll come back to Councillor.
No, thank you for that. I mean, I wasn't obviously expecting it, but so we're talking ballparks of 2% of total procurement, somewhere around
I
there.
think it's in that realm, yeah.
Okay, thank you. And I just wondered, again, for context, and I appreciate, as you say, that these are force majeure and time saving in many cases. I mean, how much quicker would you expect this to be? Because there's still a process, as you set out in your report. What sort of time do we save by doing this?
So my view is that timing cannot be a factor in whether it is right to exempt public contracts from competition. Because if that were the case, then the excuse could readily be, we'll just do our homework really late, and actually we'll just get we'll just run an exemption rather than a formal process. So in broad essence, timing isn't a correct rationale for any exemption. And the other perhaps item I'd add to that is this process is about exempting from competition, but there is still a deep diligence process around negotiating with any prospective supplier to ensure the subsequent contract is still done correctly. And my view is a competitive process is in large part around making sure the contract's right for the service to be delivered. So I don't really buy into a great deal that this is a good process because it's quicker. I buy into making sure we get the outcome right. And there is definitely diligence to placing a contract award with any provider, whether it's competed or not. And I don't feel that the right approach, except you're not implying this, please do. But I don't think the right approach is let's just follow this process because it's quicker. I don't think that's the right way to manage an exemption from tenders. And I hope that gives you some insurance around some assurance around how we properly govern this process.
Thank you. Councillor Sellis, you had a follow-up?
Just a quickie. Since the change in legislation, have you enough back office support to produce what you have to?
Well, I guess again, it is a tension we manage. There are new burdens under the Procurement Act. I alluded or mentioned to the committee a year or so ago on that. I think I have to be a realist. I would love to have a little bit more resource to manage some of these burdens. I don't suppose any director will really say we've got plenty enough to readily cover. I think there is a little bit of tension between the best places that we put all of our times for all of these things. I get a lot of support from our FPV leadership team and services around making sure we have the right people on the right jobs working efficiently enough. It does cause us some internal pulls sometime around where we place our resources. But I do think this organisation supports us really well in terms of procurement, and I don't have cause for complaint.
Thank you very much. Let's draw the tender review. Are there any lessons that we wish to draw from that? Are we content with the report? Yeah. So we've read what the operational limits are. We've seen what the exemptions have been. We understand why they've increased. We've made our point that we would not want a culture of that, exemption being routine. And the officers have assured us that that's part of the procurement services ethos anyway. So might I suggest that we accept the recommendations before us? So I propose, Councillor Sellis for second. Are we all in favour? Lovely. All right. Thank you very much, and thank you for your time. Thank you. Let's move to item 11, which is the corporate performance and risk process report, which is pages 443 to 472. And Toby Elliott, Assistant Director, is with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so this report is here to give you confidence that we have a robust performance process in place currently, and that we've got a plan to put something new in place as we move forward. The reason for two different processes is we've just been through a period where we didn't have a finalised strategic plan in place, and we felt it's important to have a strong performance reporting process during that time. So the information you've got in the report in the appendices today is based on the corporate plan, so the internal operating plan of the council for the current year, and you've got a corporate scorecard, you've got a section of the risk register. I know we're talking about risk later as well, and you've got some updates against the council's council action plans that fall out of the corporate plan. So that's all there for you to see, and that the process has been in place, and we've followed that process. Now we're moving towards a state where we've now got a full council strategic plan in place. So we're building a corporate performance framework around that. That process has started already. So we'll be looking to create a report for Cabinet, which will come here as well, that will be based on that strategic performance framework for this current quarter. That will be in early next year. And it'll be a slow process of building it up, and we'll start at the top and we'll work down. But there's some details of how we do that process in the report as well. So we're looking for you to decide whether you're happy with the current approach and whether you're happy with the suggested future approach as well.
We're being asked to decide if we're happy. That may take some time. Councillor Sellis.
Oh, am I happy? Just an observation, take you to page 2 of the 9 for the scorecard. When you put percentages, actual numbers, I dare say the scrutiny classes, scrutiny committees may have the actual numbers, but I find it confusing. For example, the number of agency social workers were given a percentage, but it'd be quite useful, and I look for some guidance here if I'm being unreasonable, but it would be quite useful having the actual number of personnel, not just a percentage, because I can't fully understand that, and when I don't fully understand things, I get a bit insecure.
Okay, so the numbers will be, you're quite right, at scrutiny level, also internal management performance boards, and they'll look at it very closely. The importance of the percentages that makes it comparable year on year or quarter on quarter, whereas the number of social workers, as an example, will need to change as we move forward, as demand changes, as resources change. So the importance of the percentages, it always makes that comparable.
But if our duty is to understand this, it would be easier for me to understand if I could equate it into numbers. That's all I'm saying. Yeah, is that all right, Chairman?
Are numbers possible?
Potentially, yes.
Thank you. Any other questions from colleagues? All right. Can I just take you to page 3 of 9, and it's the 4th indicator. It's CS4 IBP KPI 3 percentage of re-referrals. The narrative in the right-hand column says we are slightly above target and work will continue to try and lower this. And I wondered what was meant by try and lower, in the sense that as a council, we either want to lower it or we don't, but to try suggests that nothing much may happen. So, it's use of language, and all the others are about doing something, aren't they? And that was just one. So is that just a kind of loose use of language, or is it there to disguise that nothing much will happen?
I wouldn't say it's necessarily a loose use of language. What I would say is that actually in that particular case, we may not have the full control over that indicator and what may happen in the future. One of the things we will do in the new version of the strategic performance framework is not necessarily have fixed targets. So we might not say, in this instance, for example, we're looking to achieve 18% or below. We might say, actually, that falls within a range. So it might be 16% to 24%. The reason being that we don't know the numbers of people and the complexity of those cases that come through. So we need to be able to respond to that and understand that actually, if that did increase slightly, that might not be poor performance. That might just be a reflection of the cases in the system. But I take your point about the word try. It maybe doesn't seem the right word in that scenario.
And just the next one, it was on page, well, it's appendix 2, high and very high risks. And there are 3 target scores, and there are 3 where no target scores are set. And maybe I missed it in the narrative. I wasn't sure why a target score hasn't been set in those 3.
So I may refer to Brad, our senior risk officer here in a moment, but my understanding is that actually the target score approach within our risk management is a fairly new part of the approach. So we are in the process of setting all target scores. There's a new updated risk approach coming, which I don't think is at this meeting, but will be at a future meeting of the audit committee. And that will involve a review of all those risks. So target scores are still being set.
Has he said it all? Do you need to say more?
I don't need to say any more, Chair.
Excellent.
Correct.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Thank you for that very good one as well. Thank you. Anything else? My apologies, Chief
I
Executive.
think it's just important in terms of re-referrals for children that in terms of safeguarding is that we would never want to have a target for something like safeguarding where new information might come to light. So, you know, re-referrals are a really complex business because families' lives change. So I think we've got to be really careful sometimes with some of these indicators that they're much more complex than they look. What we wouldn't want is re-referrals where we haven't got the practice right, we haven't got the early help right, or we haven't assessed the situation correctly. But I think we should always be cognizant that families' lives change and a re-referral could be a good thing. So it's just to share that some of these KPIs are much more complex than the statistics that we sometimes look at, but we do keep an eye on in terms of have there's been anything in practice. But we would never want people out there who might be listening to this to think that re-referring a family because new information comes to light can be a good thing.
I think that's a wonderful point and well made. My concern in picking up the word try was at some point later on, someone says, well, we said we try, but no, you know, we weren't able to. And it's use of language, and particularly if we're having a new set of KPIs or key performance indicators and they're about the council doing, when it says, well, we do. And if there are roadblocks on the way which stop us achieving, it's best that they're explained in the relevant scrutiny committee or here. But we should use language that show an intent of purpose, shouldn't we? You know, that's, I think, really what I was trying to drive at. And then I think you're right that things aren't as easy as summed up in a sentence or two, are they? You know.
Accept, Chair, that you're absolutely correct. The language here is not correct, so let's accept that. It should perhaps be we should understand, or so I accept the point in the language, but it's just for the public listening and never want anybody to think that if new information comes to light in the concept of a re-referral, then please do re-refer into our front door. It's really important.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. So we have recommendations to committee. I'm quite happy to propose a seconder. Councillor Morgan, are we all in favour? Yes? Yeah, absolutely. We're all in favour. Lovely. Thank you very much for your time. Let's move on to item 12. And Julian, Councillor, you could be a councillor if you want, but Julian Worcester, Interim Director, has joined us. I marvel at your timing because this is twice now you've walked in just as your item starts. Absolutely wonderful. This is a report on NHS funding for educational health and care plans.
Yeah, if I do sort of general introduction, and then I've got Claire Merchant-Jones with me, who's the head of the SEND operations team. You can ask any technical specific questions. So this paper sets out the arrangements around the health contributions, the joint paper with myself, Director of Finance and Director of Public Health. Part of the challenge around the health contributions to EHCPs is the way the system works. So if you just think about the complexity of defining what is a health need, even if a young person has a diagnosis of a health need, what is the support they need to undertake the support in an education setting? And obviously the interplay between healthcare and education in that concept. So it's managing that complexity, which is quite difficult. So we know from nationally that how that is interpreted varies across the country, and there is no standard legal definitions in terms of elements of that, in terms of those contributions, and also what the definitions are. What we can say is that funding levels from the NHS into the health, education, healthcare plans in Devon is lower than other areas in that space. So that's the position we're in. The paper sets out the attempt of what we're trying to achieve, which is a protocol with our NHS colleagues around funding and how best to secure that funding. They have two elements which they have oversight of. So one is the health contribution to the EHCP. And then the second element they have within the health system is how they determine their funding of meeting health needs, whether that's within an education setting or within the home or within any other institution in terms of that funding mechanism. What they're keen to do, which we clearly would support them, is to ensure that there are services out there which families can access, which means that children don't need EHCPs or don't need significant funding around EHCPs as well. And that's the element we're looking at. It is complex because obviously there is the NHS health issues. There are other health needs which the NHS don't meet, and we can think of dentistry for one example in terms of those issues as as a practical example. And there's also services which are provided by public health from the council, which the NHS don't provide, but they expect public health to provide. So it's a complex area in terms of that setting. But that gives you a brief overview, Chairman, in terms of the challenges we're facing and how we're attempting to address them. Hopefully that's helpful context.
Thank you. Claire, you were going to add?
Hi, everybody. Just to sort of reiterate Julian's point, it is a really complex interaction, I suppose, because education, health and care plans can define particularly areas around therapies such as speech and language therapy, occupational therapy. They can go into an education, health and care plan as an educational cost and as a health cost. And with the poorly defined way, if you like, the way we're trying to support our ICB and NHS colleagues to help understand who pays for what, nationally that is not clear at the moment. So it's not as though we can look at a set of rules that already exist and pull on those. They have to be kind of regional and locally agreed ways of working. I'm happy to take any questions around, Julian, I'm happy to take any questions around the paper and any sort of technical information you're interested in this space.
Thank you. Councillor Sellis.
Yes, thank you very much. When we refer to the NHS and public health, where does antenatal care sit? Public health falls under Devon County Council, as does school nursing, I believe. And I'm just wondering what input there is with antenatal care, because it's why I asked that is that you could get a lot of potential information where parents you can identify where parents may need help at an earlier stage and prevent a lot of the issues which can occur. So really it's just for a bit of clarification. Thanks.
Yeah, it's a particular question, obviously, for Steve Brown as Director of Public Health, but certainly So antenatal care is provided by the NHS, but the linking is into public health nursing. So health visiting, as we commonly call it, is working those relationships, and health visitors are very important in terms of identifying children with special needs at an early stage, and particularly obviously whether there could be any education needs in that space. So we do rely on that service to begin to identify needs, then work with the council's early years service to identify provision which we might need in terms of childminding or day nursery provision to support family, and to try and address the child's needs at an early stage. And we do have a number of children under 4 with education healthcare plans, which I don't have at the top of my head, but which I'm sure Claire can help us with. I don't know if that answers your question. Really.
No, it was just the principle that I wanted to ask. I didn't want to go into the minutiae. It was just, it's often things are so obvious and they don't necessarily get done. That was all. And because it is such a crippling amount money-wise, that's why I'm asking. And equally, as people who care for our residents, it's a sensible question to ask that that elected members are looking at that area as well.
Yeah.
So I just really just belt and braces.
I suppose it's probably worth adding there are children with health needs who don't have EHCPs who attend school, but whose health needs are met through support from the NHS through public health nursing, or have other arrangements which the school have in place to meet those child's needs who don't need an EHCP. So, it might be some long-term health condition example, which doesn't need that level of input. So there is different ways of addressing health issues within an education setting. Clearly, part of the challenge is making sure that provision is able to meet those needs. And obviously you'll be aware of pressures on the school system in terms of staffing capacity, etc., about meeting those needs. So that's some of the conversations we get into about what is the best way of meeting needs, whether that's from a medical perspective, health perspective, or whether it's in an educational support service perspective. So it's not as straightforward. It does depend a lot on context and that particular child's needs, which may vary obviously over time.
Thank you. I'm aware that these are questions which the scrutiny committee should be asking, but as an audit committee where we're looking at the finances, that's why I'm just marrying the threads, or joining the threads.
Just aware that not only are our children shortchanged by the government, they're also now being shortchanged by the NHS. So it's twice as many. On the final page of the report, we've got our next steps with 4 bullet points. Can I just ask officers in the room how far along we are with this? As a matter of interest.
Yep, so I'll tend to answer that. So Steve Brown, Director of Public Health, is leading on the joint funding resolution policy. We have a slight issue, of course, is that the ICB is undergoing significant changes, as you'll be familiar with, both in terms of staffing reductions and the people who we are talking to, their jobs are all at risk through this process. And secondly, about merging the ICBs, which is the other factor taking in position as well. But we are trying to progress that as much as possible. And also we're looking at a joint commissioning strategy around therapies and health services as well. And that work is going on. So, I mean, we are having good engagement and there's good discussions going on about getting better assessments for particular conditions affecting children. So I want to be supportive of that work as much as possible, but it is within a challenging context within the NHS more generally. So audit current EHCPs, I don't know whether you want to comment on that, Claire. And obviously we are working with our regional and other colleagues around SEND as well. And there is a regional focus on special educational needs, as you would expect. That's linked to a wider program of how we can improve outcomes for children with education healthcare plans, and also making sure that we move to a much more inclusive system as indicated by the Secretary of State, which, you know, which we are very supportive of, and actually our transition plan supports that direction of travel.
So before you come in, can I just say I've got the Cabinet Member, Councillor Denise Bickley, indicating, and I will call Councillor Bickley in a moment, I'll come to you. I was interested in the comment about organisational change in the NHS. I mean, while for local government it comes to us once every 60 years, for them it comes about once every 3 years. You know, they live in a perpetual state of change. But they still have a day job to do, don't they? So while I'm sure the committee understands their concern about their individual jobs, for a good slice of a decade, this council's been dealing with SEND as an issue and the money side of it. So forgive me if I'm not wholly sympathetic to the musical chairs in the NHS as opposed to focusing on the children. And I think that's why we wanted the report, was to understand, you know, if the NHS is stepping up to the plate in the work that the council's doing. And I appreciate that we're, you know, in a public environment having this meeting, and you will be diplomatic in your language because you have partnerships and relationships to cherish and love and persuade on. I think the committee's concern when the council is carrying 169 million of debt on SEN was to understand that its partners are genuinely with us on this journey. And so I think that's why members are probing a bit. So I won't ask the direct question. I'll come over there in a moment if I may, because I'm going to let Claire answer, and then I'll come to the Cabinet Member and then come to you if I may. So Claire.
So I think just to link with the early, getting in early, the idea of how you work with NHS colleagues, and even the idea of, I don't know how much we can push our NHS colleagues to start funding some of this. We've got to do it in a relationship because there are no rules. And I think that's the most important bit to know here, is that this has to be done with colleagues in the NHS, because there isn't anything that tells them exactly what they should be funding in the high needs space. We're working on, so if we think about the development of the joint commissioning piece of work, we're already funding things together, and we're looking about how we can bring that a bit earlier in the process so that we can look at more children before potentially they even come into the EHC process, so that if we can kind of resolve things earlier, all the better for children, families, schools, and not needing an education, health and care plan to resolve things, particularly in the early years space. The auditing of the HCPs, we're currently looking at all the funding we're using for particularly occupational therapy and speech and language therapy for children out of the high needs budget, so we can get a really good sense of how we might work with our colleagues in the NHS and the ICB to jointly look at that together around how that provision is delivered. So hopefully that's helpful in terms of what we're doing in those two areas, and certainly regionally and nationally, there's some hope. I think that the white paper might give us a bit of a nudge in some of these areas.
I'll come to Councillor Bickley, and then I'll come to Vichivi. Councillor Bickley.
Thank you. Sorry to sort of interrupt your committee. Really, I feel a bit. I could ask this later, but seeing as we're on this subject, I'm going to wade in. And Claire, thank you for that last answer. That's really useful. My question was about the writing of the EHCP. So I think the QA of them is really key, and ensuring that everything that goes into the right sections is correct. From what I'm hearing, if it's in a certain section, we are held liable for it, and so that's the care of writing it, and that guidance, I guess, in part 4 of next steps is guidance around that, is it as well? That's my question, if that's phrased right. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thanks, Denise. So I don't want to bore people, because I could just go on about this. It's my, subject expertise, but lots of the therapy provision that ends up in an education, health and care plan comes from private reports that parents have felt that they need to go out and secure themselves because they don't have the information they need for their children as part of their referral into our children and family health Devon route and those sorts of things. I think families, let's speak on behalf of families, but my sense is they don't feel satisfied with the assessment around their children. Those private reports, therefore, are no more owned by health than they are by education. And so when they come in to be put into an education, health and care plan, health have to agree that they go into section C and G of an EHC plan, which they won't agree to because they haven't written the assessments. So part of the issue is a family has every right to go out and purchase a private assessment. What's written in that private assessment, if you don't have any NHS evidence to counter it, then really has to go in section F of an education, health and care plan. And that often comes with a significant cost in terms of private therapy. So hopefully that isn't too technical and makes sense, but that's how the journey happens, if you like, how things end up being funded by the local authority.
Thank you. Chief Executive.
Yeah, I think it's important to state that as County Council Chief Executives, we have grave concerns about the cost apportionment that is happening. I'm attending a meeting next week, so you see we're lifting it up, where the NHS National Representative is meeting with the County Council Chief Executives to discuss this matter. We all have significant concerns, not just in children's services, but in adults services. At local level, as Chief Executives of Plymouth, Torby and Devon, we are united in those concerns of cost apportionment coming and cost shunts coming to upper tier authorities because of the scale of the financial savings facing the NHS locally of a couple of £100 million. There is an update on that report going to the Adult Health Scrutiny Committee in December. It's just been received and Louise is nodding, so the delay is not through us as an organisation, but in receiving this from the NHS. It is a very, very challenging financial picture for Devon ICB. I'm very concerned about it, and there's no doubt it is impacting on this council's budget. And we have worked tirelessly to try and get a protocol in place to deal with this matter, both in adults and children. Steve Brown's been working on it, and we've not been able to resolve that. Based upon that, we're now seeking a meeting with the chair of the board to discuss this matter. This is a matter of urgency. Prior to budget setting, and if possible, Chair, to bring in the Director of Finance in this area as well, because we have such concerns about the impact that it's having on council budgets.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Rake.
Thank you. I mean, this is obviously a dark cloud that hangs over the entire life of this council. And are there any chinks of light? I mean, you say there are no rules, which I understand. Is there anywhere else in the country, for instance, where the ICB and the relevant county council or equivalent unitary, whatever it might be, have sort of found a way forward together? Is there a chance that is the sort of best practice elsewhere that we can look at?
That's correct. There is best practice elsewhere, which we build on. The challenges, that's all based on fantastic partnership working, which has been built over time and has meant that actually developmental services and provision of therapies, etc., is clear in terms of how those services are accessed. So it's not something, and it's not something that can be happen quickly. So, what Claire and colleagues are doing elsewhere is beginning that work, which has already started, but it's going to take a while for Devon to be in the same place as other authorities are, which are doing better. I have to say there is, if you think about large county councils, there's no county council in large unitaries in the country which doesn't have financial pressures. They all have financial pressures. Ours are slightly higher than others, but other authorities have done more work to prevent the higher costs that we are encountering at the moment, if that makes sense. So there is better practice, but there is not a solution as per se. There is a better way of doing this, and that's what we're working towards and beginning to address. I have to say locally, NHS partners are more engaged in this, and that's changed over the recent period, certainly since My first visit here in 23, now I've come back. Things are much better than they were. There's still a long further work we need to do to get the NHS partners involved, as there is with school colleagues as well. You know, in terms of the agenda more generally around SEND as well.
Thank you, Joe. No, just, I mean, so I'm taking away from that, you know, that things could get better, but not unilaterally. We can't just, as Devon say, this is what we're going to do. We need to bring everybody else along with us.
Yeah, if I can just come in and say for you, Chairman, that both two things. One is we need the government's white paper to set out the course of the work. We've obviously got the Secretary of State's statement about the priorities, which we, you know, totally supportive of. At the second time, it's going to take time to work through that, even if we start now, in terms of the delivery. And we have started out, which Claire's touched on. We are making an impact. It's going to, you know, you're changing a system. It is complicated. It's getting the arrangements in place, and there are other local NHS challenges which the NHS need to deal with as well as supporting this area of work. And as obviously the Chief Executive touched on, there are significant challenges around the NHS in Devon, which your colleagues may be familiar with around the table.
Thank you. And Director of Finance, Angie.
Thank you, Chair. We're used to NHS colleagues owing us money. What we've seen recently is with our age debt. So this is money that NHS have accepted that they owe us. So age debt is more than 90 days since the invoice was raised. We're used to that being about £1 million. Recently, we've seen that increase to £4 million. So we are working with finance colleagues in the local health system to rectify that. You'll see in the statement of accounts that we're owed significantly more than that. I think at the end of March it was, excuse me, about 17 million. So the actual money that is agreed that they will pay is slower coming than it used to be. But I think our biggest area of risk is the lack of agreement for what is due to the County Council. As mentioned in the report, and I think Julian did reference it, adult colleagues have done some work, and Devon receives a lower contribution from health than any other council in England. And we know anecdotally that Plymouth and Torbay possibly receive more than the County Council does. So there's a wider piece of work needed here to understand why we're receiving less and to make sure that the County Council receives what is due to it. But as Julian said, it's a long piece of work, it's a long road. This isn't going to change overnight.
Thank you very much for that and the insight on the debt and the payment. May I draw us to a conclusion on this, which we've got the recommendation set out, which is that we note the systemic and financial challenges. But may I suggest, committee, that we consider this? What we've heard is that there's a lack of guidance nationally on the apportionment from council to the NHS, if I understood that correctly. Might I suggest that we, well, either as a committee, but I'm more thinking that perhaps a cabinet member ought to write to the Secretary of State on this, copy to the Devon MPs, setting out if there's going to be a white paper, it might be that we are timely in influencing the thinking. And we should welcome the work that our colleagues are doing with the NHS locally. I think it's very heartening to hear from the Director about the way relationships have improved and are developing. That's much to be welcomed. I think what we can do is the more strategic bit, and I think it would be better if it comes from the cabinet member in terms of a letter to the Secretary of State setting out the cost apportionment issues in terms of the effect of, and then copying that to MPs so they're cited on it too. Can I just check with you, Chief Executive, that would be okay for us to do?
I think any form of support is necessary. But if you go back to earlier reports this afternoon, it's quite clear that the SEND deficit is a major challenge. So anything that can be carried out to support us in discussing that. And as I said, everybody's trying to raise it strategically and working locally. So anything, because we have, I suppose quite simply, we don't have a date for the white paper yet. And I know the cabinet member shares my concern that will a white paper be forthcoming and in 2026, when in 2026, especially when we were promised it in 2025. So anything on this matter, I think, is supportive to the council.
So I think, sorry, Councillor Sellis, you were.
Thank you. Yes, I would fully support what you're suggesting. And there is a terrific sense of frustration that so much of what I've been hearing today, I've been hearing for years. And I really feel most strongly that we need all areas of health, public health, maternity, the whole lot. If we're putting anything, that it has to be right across the piece, and that people, it's too fragmented. And I just think people are obviously, it's so huge that it's almost, you feel that you're not going to get it better. So how do you put that into words so that if we are going to do that, that it has to be inclusive? Do you get my drift?
So I think is one bite at a time. So if I think one letter, one issue for the elephant, which is, I think what the committee's heard is that there clearly is an improving relationship with the NHS in Devon, which is welcomed. Dealing with them with the more strategic issue is about a lack of national clarity about what is apportioned where. And I'm looking for some nods, that's right. And it's that issue I think we should write to the Secretary of State about via the Cabinet member, ask the Cabinet member to write that letter. Officers will no doubt shape it for the Cabinet member's signature and approval. I think what the committee will want is a copy of the letter when it goes, so we know that it's gone. And I think that's a service, and not only to Devon, but also to the wider family and nationally. I think we can't know what the relationships are like in other places. What we have to do is welcome what's going on in Devon and welcome that working together. That's improved, we've heard that. I think what we can do is hopefully influence change in the sort of next order of time if government are going to issue a white paper.
That's a proposal, Chair. I'm happy to second.
Brilliant. Okay, that's a proposal. You've seconded it. Councillor Rake.
Sorry, if we're tinkering with the recommendation, could I suggest that we also explicitly endorse and support the next steps set out at item 7? I think because I think it's really important to highlight our support of this collaborative approach to working with partners.
So let's get that in an order then. The committee is asked to note the systemic and financial challenges. Item B is to endorse the next steps set out in paragraph 7, and then item C is a letter which we're asking the Cabinet member to write to the Secretary of State, copy to the Devon MPs with a copy to us. All right. Councillor Morgan proposed, I second, or was it the other way around? Whatever, you can make it up. Are we all in favour? Yes, thank you very much. Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you for your time. Is that okay with you? Well, it's a bit late now, but lovely. Thank you very much, and thank you too for that. Let's move to item 13, counter fraud update, pages 473 to 482, and Tony Rhodes, Head of Devon Assurance Partners.
Thank you, Chair. So just a few key points on this one, if I can draw attention to those. So first one is page 478 is 1.2. Essentially what we're looking to do in advance of the next financial year is update the reporting to the committee so that we can provide more information, more on the so what as much as anything else, and also a little bit more in the detail. So wanted to make that clear. So if there is feedback from the committee members about what would be helpful, that would be welcomed. Obviously, we have to be careful about what we can and can't say in this area, but there's a bit of an ask there. From the point of view of the work and the assurances to the committee around the proactive work around counter fraud, pages 479 into 480 talk about the National Fraud Initiative. This is an exercise that I've talked about before, and my colleague sat behind me here work hard on this throughout the years to make sure that actually the information that comes in is dealt with in an appropriate way and is used to ensure that fraud and error is identified and actions taken upon them. So, for example, blue badges can be misused. They are misused, and you'll see a note on of 3,112 records were provided back to the authority from the NFI data. And in essence, what happens is the authority provides information to the NFI. The NFI match that data with other information, then come back and say you might want to look at X, Y, and Z. In this case, you have blue badge names, if you like, whereby it's understood that the person might be deceased. In this instance, that resulted in an update of another 2,655 records. The others had already been updated. So from that perspective, those blue badges were cancelled and therefore cannot be used were they being used fraudulently. So there's a lot of activity that goes on in that, and there are values apportioned to those. I think also 5.8, there was a request for a new set of data, which technically is not new. It was provided as part of the exercise in years gone by. Legislation changed and it had to be updated again to ensure that information around residential care home placements was provided. So that information was requested on a fairly short deadline, if I can term it that way, and the council was very proactive in making sure that it met that deadline. So we're now waiting for that information to come back, and that will be worked through. I think the other point to note is around paragraph 6.3 on page 480, whereby there is work to ensure that in advance of the next financial year, all of the council's policies are updated in line as they need to be with legislative and other changes. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Content? Opposed? Councillor Sellis, seconded Councillor Morgan. We're all agreed. Thank you very much. Was that a bit too quick?
Perfect. Thank you, Chair.
But Chief Executive's gone. Risk management audit update, item 14. Please, Brad.
Thank you, Chair. So we are on page 13 of the supplementary agenda for the papers. Chair, I'll just share a couple of key messages in the interest of time. My usual current risk performance topics there, and the very high risks to the organisation, a few of which have already been mentioned today. The final one on the very high risk list there, the health, safety, wellbeing risk has been subject to much discussion in the last few meetings, and I just wanted to set a clear roadmap about what the proposed work around that risk looks like between now and the next committee meeting in early in the new year in February 26. The plan, working alongside officers and leadership, is to now split that risk into looking at two key areas that are concerning stakeholders within this. The first of which is focusing on DCC's assets and personnel, and the second of which focusing on the council's responsibilities around counter-terrorism. There is information in my paper here that hopefully will help sort of paint the picture, I guess, in terms of context as to why we've taken this approach, and we look forward to obviously bringing that to the committee in February 26. I think crucially, Chair, that will hopefully bring some reassurance to yourself and to members of the committee that effective mitigating controls are in place to manage that risk. And then just lastly, on the current work that the risk management team are completing at the moment, just going to draw the second bullet point out there. We had intended to bring the updated risk management policy and strategy document to this committee, but we have pushed that back into February 26. So you'll be hearing lots from me on that day, but the reason for that is we had some feedback from the executive leadership group that we wanted to act on. It was good feedback, so we want to make sure we respond to that and bring that to the committee in February 26th. So that's it for me, Chair.
Thank you. Questions? Accepting the recommendations proposed? Councillor Morgan, Councillor Rake will propose. Councillor Morgan seconded. Are we in favour? We are completely. Thank you very much. And that takes us to item 15, which was the appointment of independent members to the committee, which we dealt with earlier, and they were appointed, and we thank them for that as well. Before we move to the future meetings, I should have said earlier, but it's not linked to earlier. We dealt with earlier reports about which included some treasury management information. If the committee is so minded, I think we should ask invite the Council's Governance Committee to consider whether Treasury management information should routinely go to scrutiny or should come to audit as a routine part of our work, given that we are the audit committee. I don't think they need to go to both, but I mean, just whether it sits in scrutiny or whether it sits in audit. And I think that maybe that's something that officers and the governance committee might want to consider. If you're content with that, can we just ask the committee clerk to make that request to the governance committee on our behalf? Are you content with that? All right. Thank you very much. Catherine.
Thanks, Chair. I did preempt this with the head of investments, and he had sent me a comment on this one, so he had to leave the meeting earlier. But I just wanted to read out his comment on this, if that's all right. So he said the Treasury Management Code sets out that we have to nominate a committee to be responsible for the scrutiny of Treasury management strategy. This could be scrutiny committee or an audit committee. The council has chosen to nominate the SIRS scrutiny committee to undertake that role, and that's set out in the authority's overarching Treasury management policy and practices. So to change the committee responsible, this would need to be amended, which would be a decision for full council. The role is a full scrutiny role that goes beyond risk assurance and governance. And so the audit committee would need training that the SIRS scrutiny committee has already received. And on the basis of the last two meetings, SIRS has got to grips with the subject. So I just wanted to share that note, which he shared with me before.
It's delightful to be so well briefed on something that comes up on the spur of the moment. And I'm entirely accepting of that. I don't think there is any harm in this committee asking governance to look at that again. If it comes to the same answer, it does. If it comes to a different view, then it obviously goes to council with a recommendation. But I think our view is that that perhaps doesn't sit well, but others need to look at that. It's not for ours to, it's not a grab on scrutiny's powers. It's simply asking the question about that, given that we're an audit committee and it's treasury management. So we'll make that request. All right, lovely, thank you. So the next meeting is the 24th of February next year at 2 p.m. Before you all go, may I wish you a very happy Christmas. Hopefully we'll see you before all of that as well. But anyway, can I say thank you very much to the officers and to our colleagues Grant Thornton. Would you pass that back as appropriate for their time and energies today? It's been a really good meeting. We've cracked through a lot and I think we've made some key recommendations that have gone through. So thank you very much. All right, thank you.